September 1944. A narrow alley in occupied Paris. A German Feldgendarmerie patrol walks through the shadows, their boots echoing off wet cobblestones. They never see the figure emerge from a doorway behind them. They never hear the metallic click. One moment, the rear guard is alive. The next, he lies motionless on the ground, and his Schmeisser submachine gun has vanished into the darkness along with his killer. The weapon that killed him looked like a child's toy. Crude stamped metal, welded seams visible, no rifling in the barrel. By any measure of firearms engineering, it was the worst gun ever produced by American industry. It was also exactly what its designers intended. The problem facing American strategists in 1942 was brutally simple to state, and seemingly impossible to solve. Hitler's armies had enslaved 200 million people across occupied Europe. These civilians wanted to fight back, but they had no weapons. Traditional supply methods were hopeless. Parachute drops could deliver small quantities of weapons to organised resistance groups, but only at enormous risk. A single compromised drop could expose entire networks. Smuggling operations through neutral countries moved weapons one at a time, far too slow to arm the masses yearning for liberation. Most resistance fighters were forced to rely on hunting rifles, farm tools, and improvised explosives. They needed real weapons, millions of them. The German response to armed resistance was swift and merciless. Possession of any firearm meant immediate execution. House-to-house searches uncovered hidden weapons. Informants reported suspicious activity. The Wehrmacht had turned weapon confiscation into a science, and they were winning the war against civilian uprising. The solution came from an unlikely source. Frederick Forget, a civilian engineer at the Guide Lamp Division of General Motors in Anderson, Indiana, was tasked with designing not a weapon, but a strategy. His assignment was unprecedented. Create a firearm so cheap, so simple, that America could manufacture millions and flood occupied Europe with them faster than the Germans could confiscate them. Forget understood immediately that conventional thinking would fail. A normal pistol cost $15 to $20 to produce and required skilled machinists. At that rate, America couldn't arm more than a fraction of Europe's resistance. He needed to think differently. What if the goal wasn't to make a good gun? What if the goal was to make a gun good enough for one single shot at point-blank range, and nothing else? What Forget delivered defied every principle of firearms design. The FP45, coded name Liberator, consisted of just 23 stamped steel parts. No springs, no moving mechanisms, no safety. The barrel was a simple steel tube with no rifling. The trigger was a basic lever that struck a firing pin. Total weight, 1 pound. Total cost, $2.10. To put that in perspective, a standard M1901 Colt pistol cost $26.38. The Liberator cost less than a single box of ammunition. Production began at Guide Lamp in July 1942. The factory in Anderson, Indiana normally produced automotive headlights and directional signals. Now, it was about to become the largest firearms manufacturer in human history. The manufacturing process was deliberately primitive. Each gun was assembled by workers using basic hand tools. No precision machinery, no complex tolerances. Most of the workers were women with no firearms experience, and that was intentional. If the weapon required expertise to build, it couldn't be mass-produced. A trained worker could complete one pistol every 6.6 seconds. The factory operated around the clock, producing 1,000 pistols per hour. That's one complete firearm every 3.6 seconds, 24 hours a day for 13 months. The Liberator fired a single Grund 45 caliber cartridge. Effective range, 25 feet maximum. Optimal range, arm's length. Each pistol came packed in a waxy cardboard box with 10 rounds total. 5 loaded in the grip, 5 spare, and a simple pictographic instruction sheet. The instruction sheet was a masterpiece of simple design. No words, just pictures showing how to load, fire, and reload. The reload process required pushing out the spent case with a pencil or stick. A child could understand it. A resistance fighter in the dark could follow it. The entire package could be buried in a garden, dropped from a plane, or hidden in a wall. And if captured, the Germans would find a weapon worth less than the cost of the search operation. But the Liberator's true genius was not mechanical. It was tactical. The weapon was never intended for sustained combat. Its purpose was singular, Allow a resistance fighter to kill one enemy soldier at point-blank range and acquire his superior weapon. The Liberator was not a gun. It was a key, a disposable tool to unlock access to German rifles, pistols, and ammunition. Think of it as an asymmetric multiplication system. One Liberator could acquire one German Mauser rifle. That rifle, properly used, could arm 2 fighters. Those 2 fighters could acquire 2 more weapons. Each successful deployment didn't just arm one person, it triggered a cascade. The Office of Strategic Services developed specific protocols. The Liberator was never to be used in open combat, never fired at ranges beyond 10 feet, never kept after the first use. The recommended tactic: approach a lone sentry from behind, fire once into the base of the skull, take his weapon, disappear. It was cold-blooded, it was necessary, and it worked. Field reports from French partisans described the psychological impact. German soldiers grew paranoid about isolated duty. Sentries requested partners. Patrols bunched together, making them less effective. The mere existence of the Liberator, its disposable, untraceable nature, created a climate of fear. Every German soldier knew. The civilian walking past him might have a crude American pistol in their pocket, and once that pistol was fired, it would be thrown away, leaving no evidence, no trail, no way to prevent the next attack. By late 1943, German intelligence reports began documenting a disturbing pattern. Sentries were being found dead with no signs of struggle. Weapons were disappearing from guard posts. Small arms stockpiles in occupied territories were being systematically raided. The common factor: a crude American pistol found abandoned at the scene. What the Wehrmacht discovered was that traditional counterinsurgency tactics were useless against the Liberator. Every time they confiscated 100 crude pistols, 1,000 more appeared. The weapon's disposable nature meant resistance fighters felt no attachment to it. They would use it once and discard it, making it impossible to trace or prevent distribution. The German army was forced to respond. They pulled combat troops from front lines to conduct weapon sweeps. They established checkpoints that slowed supply lines. They implemented mandatory searches that tied up thousands of soldiers. Post-war analysis revealed the staggering cost. German forces diverted an estimated 50,000 soldiers from frontline duty to weapon confiscation operations. Each $2.10 pistol forced the enemy to spend approximately $47 in countermeasures. Even more damaging, Axis ammunition, stockpiles in occupied territories decreased by 23% due to theft following Liberator deployments. The weapon wasn't just arming the resistance, it was actively disarming the occupation forces. Between July 1942 and August 1943, Guide Lamp Division produced 1,000 FP45 Liberator pistols, more individual firearms than had ever been manufactured in a single production run. The Office of Strategic Services distributed approximately 600,000 across occupied France, Italy, Norway, Greece, and the Philippines. Distribution methods were creative and ruthless. Containers were airdropped with false markings. Pistols were smuggled through neutral countries. Resistance networks established distribution chains, passing weapons hand-to-hand across hundreds of miles. In the Philippines, American guerrillas received 50,000 Liberators and used them to devastating effect against Japanese occupation forces. The remaining 400,000 pistols were held in reserve for a scenario that haunted American strategists: Japanese invasion of the American mainland. If West Coast cities fell, these crude pistols would arm American civilians for guerrilla warfare. Thankfully, that contingency never materialized. After the war, military analysts struggled to quantify the Liberator's impact. How do you measure a weapon that was designed to be discarded? How do you count victories won with guns that were immediately thrown away? The evidence was indirect but compelling. In regions where Liberators were deployed, resistance activity increased by 40%. German casualties from close-range assassinations tripled. Weapons theft became epidemic. The FP45 Liberator remains the most produced American firearm in history. Modern firearms manufacturers, obsessed with accuracy, reliability, and aesthetics, cannot comprehend its design philosophy. It was deliberately inaccurate, intentionally crude, and purposefully disposable. It achieved strategic success precisely because it violated every rule of good gun design. The lesson transcends firearms. The Liberator proved that in asymmetric warfare, the perfect weapon isn't the most powerful or accurate. It's the one your enemy cannot effectively counter. Precision is useless if you can't mass-produce it. Quality is irrelevant if you can't distribute it. Sophistication becomes a liability when simplicity wins the war. We'll never know exactly how many German soldiers were killed with Liberators, or how many resistance fighters used them to begin their armed struggle. The weapon's design ensured it would leave no clear historical record, and that was exactly the point. In the grim mathematics of total war, the Liberator proved that sometimes the worst weapon is actually the best weapon. 1 million crude pistols armed a continent and helped bring down an empire, not through superior engineering, but through superior strategy.